You and your family have a long history with the Bidens, and you and I have talked many times about how he shouldn't have run in 19 and shouldn't have run in 24, and so the whole thing is skewed by that. But in addition, you talk to a lot of normal people. It's one of the strengths of you as a commentator, and you and I know many people who saw the decline. And so that's the outside story. That's the public story. But you also know Jake Tapper, and I know you've got strong feelings about his putting his name on this book. So let's start there, since that's where I ended my monologue. What's your view of Jake Tapper's credibility in writing a book about exposing the cover up of what happened with Joe Biden's mental acuity decline?
So I've known Jake Tapper since I was a little girl. He worked on he covered my dad's first campaign when he was a salon reporter to just like really date in 1999, 2000. So I have been around him a really long time. And I used to really think he was a straightforward journalist. And then in the past, I think beginning of Trump era, maybe even a little bit before that, I just really put him in the basket of being a really biased, quite frankly, hack journalist that my conservative friends not only wouldn't trust, but felt like he would intentionally go out of the way to paint a negative picture of conservatives. Um, it's hard, as you know, when you like know people in this industry and you want to maintain friendships. But he's one of those people where, for me, it took a point where I was like, I just can't really have a relationship of any kind with this person. Um, just because I don't feel like any of it is genuine or altruistic. And also, I don't like being a source for people that I'm not genuinely close with and feel like there's trust there. So when I found out he was writing this book, I really like Alex Thompson. I had interviewed Alex Thompson several times when he came out about his reporting about Joe Biden, um, right before the debate and when everyone started really realizing how bad it was. And I was really looking forward to Alex Thompson's book. And when I saw that Jake Tapper was involved or had written it or whatever, is the co-writer, I jokingly told my friend, it's like OJ Simpson's If I Did It book. Like, I thought it was ridiculous and just, quite frankly, I think it's like journalistic malfeasance. And he's kind of, dancing a little bit right now, saying that he should have had more humility in his reporting and that he should have, known better. But there's hundreds, if not thousands, of reporters who did cover the story the right way, including you. And there's millions and millions of Americans who saw what he was unable to see. And, there's a video of him with Laura Trump, who I'm very friendly with, and she's a really lovely person, where he's just ripping her head off, talking about when she's bringing up Biden's cognitive decline. And he's basically saying that she's like, bigoted towards people with disabilities because President Biden has a stutter. And every like few months that video goes viral again. And I just think he's completely the wrong person to be doing this. I'm sure he got a big fat paycheck. I'm sure he
Yeah.
got $6 million. And I'm just really, I feel like actually like physically grossed out at the idea that he's benefiting off of what you and I and so many other people were called ghouls, called, really ugly names and things for a long time, for calling out what we all could see was Biden's clear decline.
Yeah. So you and I have both spent time in newsrooms, and we understand the culture of the liberal media. CNN has defended Jake Tapper and said, he was just tough. He was super tough on this. Their statements run counter to what Tapper, as you pointed out, and I mentioned last segment, is saying now, which is he could have been tougher. What do you think's happening? Let's start with CNN and then talk about NBC and other places. What do you think's happening at CNN now? Do you think they think this is a time for self-reflection, or this is just a time to help Jake sell books? How do you think they are viewing this moment?
I don't understand any of it. I also don't understand what the publisher's reasoning was. I have heard through just like gossip and media circles that the publisher thought that Alex Thompson wasn't like a big enough name to sell this book. I disagree. I think he would have been more
Yeah.
than big enough, just the content of the book.
And, and, and if it was just his book, you and I would look at it in a much different light.
100%. And I would buy it if it were just his book, and I would be like happy
Yeah.
to interview him because I do think, he just won an award about his reporting, and I don't put him in the same category, but I do think, unfortunately for Alex, like, this is tainting his career. I don't I used to really appreciate CNN, and I still candidly have friends who work at CNN. Like, I'm friends with S.E. Cupp, and she's, wonderful and I think very smart and very like a straight shooter in her commentary. But CNN became such resistance porn the past few years, and their ratings reflected that. And, they can't even say, like, if Trump cured cancer, they would come up with some reason why he didn't do it effectively or why it was bad. And I think when you get to a point where Trump clouds your judgment and your life so much, you become a parody of yourself. And I think, unfortunately, they have. I was wondering if maybe Jake Tapper and CNN didn't realize to the degree how much the outside world views him that way. And again, as you say, like, I have friends in real life, like we all do, and they hate him. And it's not just people on the right, it's people in the center, people on the center left, because they just don't think he's a reliable person who continues to get rewarded over and over again in media like he is some kind of Edward R. Murrow figure, and it's just a fallacy.
Okay, let's talk about another place, NBC, where you and I both worked.
Mhm.
Let's say the head of NBC News
Very
calls.
briefly.
Yeah.
Very briefly.
But you know people there too. Let's say New York Times. Let's say the publisher or the editor of the New York Times, my college roommate Joe Kahn. Let's say he called you and he said, "Megan, I saw you on Next Up with Mark, and totally agree. This is the moment where we need to try to restore some credibility by coming clean. What should we do? What could the New York Times do to try to restore credibility on the issue of how they covered or didn't cover Joe Biden's mental decline?"
They're they're neat in the same way that there's scalps on our side where, like, any Republican who does the wrong thing is, like, banned from all polite society. There need to be some scalps on their side too. Some people need to get fired for the work that they did during this time and completely biased reporting. I would tell them that they need to hire some legitimately conservative leaning people to write their opinion columns. And then I would be like, you need to really take a reflection on the journalists who work in your newsroom, like what kind of biases they're bringing to the table. And I would have to go through it with like a fine tooth comb. But, I have a list of people in my brain that I trust and people that I would say, stay the hell. I mean, you and I both have people, maybe you don't, but I do. I have like people who work in politics and media who come to me and they're like, is this a safe person for me to talk to? Or is this person
Yeah.
going to screw me? And I'll say, they're good, they're bad, stay away from them. I mean, like, not to, like, spill too much tea. The Atlantic approached me about doing a profile, and I was like, "I wouldn't do a profile with The Atlantic if there was, like,
They
money."
wanted you to write one, or they wanted to profile you.
They want to do an interview with me, and I just am not co what's the point? Like,
Yeah.
to be called, like, Mrs. Waterford from The Handmaid's Tale? Like, I'm just too awful.
I loved your list. The other thing I would say to the New York Times is hire an outside person with credibility. Let them interview all your reporters and editors who covered the Biden administration and ask them, show them videos of Biden, talking to a dead congresswoman and exhibiting obvious decline and say, why didn't you write more about this? Who did you ask about this? Because I've talked to some of them and some of the reporters knew full well what was going on. There was this culture that said, we're just not covering this story.
Yeah. I also think one of the things that when people ask me about newsrooms, people talk a lot about diversity, but I think diversity also means like, what area of the country are you from? Did you not go to an Ivy League school? What kind of socioeconomic background do you come from? Like, it can't just be like respectful to myself, rich Nepo babies and went to Ivy League schools who are always a lot of times when I work in newsrooms, like 50% of the time, somebody is related to somebody famous, or like their aunt is like a famous journalist, or their person's like a famous politician. And I think and again, respectful to myself because a lot of my career benefited from that now. But if I were in a newsroom, I'd be like, you need to start getting people from the middle of the country, people that did not go to Ivy League schools, whatever, people that go to like, Arizona State has an incredible journalism school. Like, they need to branch out and like,
Yeah.
you can't cover America if you don't understand America. And 90% of the time, and again, respectful to you too. I know you went to an Ivy League school, great, like whatever. But I think that's part of the rot in this. It's like,
Yeah.
you've never been to Iowa. How can you talk about the Iowa caucus?
Right. Yeah. All right. Your dad had a close relationship with Joe Biden, although it was not perfect. I mean, I know there was
Right.
conflict between them
Yeah.
on some things. Um, for one thing, your dad thought Joe Biden talked too much, but he was not the only one who fit in that category.
He also
And you,
called him Joe the
yeah.
Biden. I remember him like saying that. But they sort of like
Wait, say that again.
called him like Joe the Biden. Like
Joe
for some
Biden.
reason he thought that was so funny. He'd be like, Joe the Biden. I don't know. But yeah, my parents actually, when they met, they met in Hawaii. Joe and Jill were there and they had a very nice relationship, like, coupley for a long time, I think until politics, quite frankly, got involved. And then they sort of circled back around when my dad got sick. And
Yeah.
it's tricky for me because President Biden was lovely to me when my dad was sick. Very kind, very, like answered tough questions about brain cancer. And then, and I've told this publicly, it's not something I'm secretive about. They asked me to endorse him. His campaign approached me and asked me to endorse him at the DNC in 2020. And I said no, because I'm still a conservative Republican. And I never spoke to Biden's again. And his staff made it very very clear that I was dead to them and their administration and their team, and I was so shocked by the experience because it was so ugly and bizarre, and, he's like, "I love everybody, I love Republicans,"
Yeah.
like, except if I
Who
won't
who
go on
who on
stage.
who on his staff issued those threats?
I will tell you offline, but
Oh, okay.
they are no longer a person
Well,
that's worth they have gotten their I will say they have gotten their karmic retribution that has nothing to do with me.